When I first heard about the Book in a Week program, as curious as I was about it, my initial thought was actually, that's impossible. No one could possibly make a book in a single week, and I definitely didn't believe I could. It was just this whole idea of having to plan, produce, and provide a whole book with the intention of someone other than myself reading it, and that really scared me actually. Then I attended the Myth of Failure workshop, and it made me realize that the only thing that was making it impossible was truly myself. I had a fear of failing to live up to this unreal expectation of myself when instead I could have shifted my mindset into staying curious, like I had initially. I could have focused on the questions that I was asking instead of fearing the questions I was asking. Like, could I create a story and start writing it in this time? And how? Could I finish something achievable? And how? And then, truly, how much was I putting on myself before I had even started? I learned that it's often the uncomfortable ideas that facilitate the most growth. And I'm glad I followed my uncomfortable idea. Although I didn't manage to finish a book in a week, I did plan and flesh it out, and I got a star on it, which is probably the best achievement that I had then. Now I'm doing a personal book about my gap year experience during COVID, and I've come to realize that writing is a very realistic career path that I could pursue. And all in all, it was very much a valuable experience.
Welcome back to the With Joey B podcast. That was a lovely example there from Aina, who's a member of the Constant Student, about the power of the myth of failure workshop. And we run that within Constant Student, and we're also including it in a new challenge for people who are earlier in their careers or have recently finished high school, called the Exponential Career, which is a experience that appropriates you for the modern world rather than the traditional kind of structures we're used to that are more geared towards linear career paths where you pick something at 18 that you're meant to do for the rest of your life, because linear life equals linear returns, flat and not compounding, whereas the exponential career, which represents a lot of the alternative ways you can build your kind of pathway, crossing between conventional and unconventional jobs, existing industries and the industries that haven't been born yet, and how to navigate that, given that what you're likely to do is very likely to change. So spending years becoming a lawyer or an engineer or a psychologist might not be the most effective thing you can be doing. Now, I want to tie in this idea of the myth of failure to some of the recent podcast episodes, right? For example, helping people find their audience of none. Also, the concept that of not letting anyone set your ceiling. For me, failure is not an acceptable ceiling for things, rather the fear of failure. Because the fear of failure is what will deter people so often, but they very rarely tell you that. A lot of the time people will just say they're busy or they don't have time, they've got something else on, and the real thing that they're afraid of is failing. And we use the Myth of Failure workshop as just one of 14 parts of the Exponential Career challenge. It's just one of those things that is fundamentally misunderstood, in my opinion, is what failure actually is. And I won't go into it. It's something that you can, if curious, look into the experience at the Constant Student website, which will be in the show notes. And yes, I believe part of my philosophy is I believe there's tremendous value in starting with what people are intrinsically interested in, what they do for an audience of none, which is one of my most, I guess, quoted or referred to kind of concepts, which helps you feel like identify what you really enjoy spending time doing just for the process of it, which we've talked about in the podcast before. My philosophy is we start with that, and then we navigate other things like, you know, how you're going to make money and how you will accommodate the rest of your life's needs around what comes to you intrinsically. Sounds pretty obvious. It's not where most places start. It's not where we start now with modern education, infrastructure and institutions. So much of it starts with trying to be successful, trying to be financially secure in many situations. People struggle to identify what they're intrinsically interested in internally, because normally we're very littered and polluted by external value sets, things that don't come from us, that are socially derived. So separating the water from the oil, so to speak, is difficult. So we want to be able to give people resources to do that. So that's part of the philosophy behind the Exponential Career, and then how I think we work on uplifting people. So this is just one of these in-between episodes where I reflect on and review what's happening and some of the things happening out in the world you can participate in to take this further than just listening and going over it on the podcast. But anyway, coming up on the podcast, we have some episodes around things like convincing someone to take a better path and how you do that, how to change someone's worldview. Interesting to see what you think of those episodes. The relevance of sales and marketing for everyday life. But also, so there's some of the episodes coming up, and reminder, they're all short, 5 to 10 minutes normally, daily, one released every morning. So a reminder, I've now started putting season 2 up on YouTube, so all episodes for season 2 will now be on YouTube, so it can be an easier place to, or a more pleasant place for you to follow along, which is exciting. With Joe Weeby is the YouTube channel. As a general reminder, if you're new to the podcast, season 1 of With Joe Weeby was all about how we're wired and the fundamentals of meaning. Not that I have all the answers, but it was a big exploration of that, and that was from episodes 1 to 121. And I kind of broke it down into different segments and things there. This season is about the philosophy behind education, learning, and I guess human potential and ability. How far you can really go, what you're really capable of learning and doing. And that's from seasons 122 onwards. But yep, so there's some of the places you can go. Just remember, you can sign up to, in the links for the show notes, there'll be a link called Everything Joe, I believe. And there, the top link to sign up to the Doorman is where I summarize the week's worth of podcast episodes in one very short email, normally early in the week. I normally put the 5 biggest takeaways from those episodes and any very important updates. And that's literally, I keep it very simple, concise, to the point for people who want to follow along but can't listen to every episode and also want to get it distilled. So even if you are listening to the episodes, it might be something that you find useful because it can help you reflect and go over. I'm not a big fan of just randomly consuming content, books, podcasts, blogs. I'm more about studying content because you can read things to make you feel productive, and sometimes things are just interesting, and that's great. But you really get the most value out of, you're probably best off focusing on a few resources that you get a lot of value out of and actually really unearthing that through studying it. So if this podcast is one of those resources to help you think more clearly and navigate forward more confidently, then that is something I would recommend. So you can just sign up there. There'll be a summary every week at least on the latest of the podcast and links to all the recent episodes. So that's all for now. I'm very excited to see you again tomorrow. And remember, as always, that the best way to open 1,000 doors for you is to concentrate on opening doors for others.